6 minutes is a short time in most cases. Although nothing happened to me during those 6 minutes spent between the two trains at the station, those 6 minutes were enough to turn my happy marriage into a real halaboodle. At least I considered it happy, since my lovely wife never told me anything different. I thought we could both agree on that, but how wrong I was. My lovely wife Anna Christina's twin sister lived in the main city on the south coast of our Scandinavian country, and since twins are usually very close, they visited each other quite often. Usually these visits were of a family nature, and on the few times my wife traveled without me, she always took our children and sometimes her mother with her. This time was different. Tuesday night she asked me, "Do you mind if I go to Marie-Louise's next weekend?" "No, not at all, because I have some very important work to do. What about the children? Will they be going with you as usual?" "Not this time, no, neither the kids, nor Mom, nor I will take the train, not just the two of us." I was a little surprised because our two children and their two cousins were very fond of each other and sometimes used as an excuse to visit. I said, "The kids will be very disappointed if you go without them." "Yes, I know, but their cousins won't be home because Kenneth is taking them on the camping trip they've been looking forward to. Marie-Louise and I will go shopping and have dinner, just her and me, if you don't mind." I didn't mind, but I was still a little surprised. And then it all went downhill from there. Thursday morning, glancing at the calendar in the home office, I noticed that she had written for Friday, train 3:09 p.m. The nearest main station for express trains was in a town about 30 kilometers from ours, and I was used to having clients arrive there from time to time. So I knew the departure times of the express trains and that the northbound train towards the capital departed at 15:09 and the southbound train at 15:03. Simple knowledge because these express trains always departed 3 and 9 minutes after each hour all day long. I didn't say anything to Anne Christine, but I did talk to one of my local car club acquaintances who worked in a different department of the same company as Anne Christine. He promised to do me a favor because he had a bad experience with his own cheating wife. At 3 p.m. on Friday, he was standing on the platform of the high-speed train at the main train station, and at 3:10 p.m. he called me to let me know that the northbound train had arrived at the point and my wife was on board with a fellow employee named Tommy Blommer. He even sent me some pictures from his cell phone. In one of them, I saw the two co-workers kissing. I waited for Anne Christine's train to pass the first of several stops and called her twin sister, who, judging by her voice, was very surprised by my call. I told her, "Dear Marie-Louise, I'm asking you a favor because I have an urgent job in your city early tomorrow morning, and I'll be there for a few hours. Can I spend the night at your house? Just one night, and I can share the spare room with Anne Christine so you won't have any unnecessary problems with me. Will that suit you?" What could she answer? She could hardly say no because she usually slept at my house when she and her family came to visit her parents and us in her old hometown. After a while, she said, "Sure, no problem. As usual, you're always welcome." I was sure she immediately called my wife, and the sweet sisters had a real problem to solve. Marie-Louise called me 15 minutes later and said, "As I said, we are very much looking forward to seeing you. But Anne Christine called me a few minutes after you called and said she had a little silly problem and would be here very late. Probably not until tomorrow afternoon." I feigned surprise and asked, "What kind of problem?" "She got on the wrong train by a silly mistake." "Impossible. And even if she did, she should have had the good sense to get off the wrong train at the first stop, where she could have changed to the next southbound train with less than 3 hours delay. Where was she when she told you about the wrong train? And has she gotten off that train now?" Marie-Louise was panicked and replied in an angry voice, "How should I know? I didn't ask her for any details. Why don't you ask her yourself?" Now it was time for the truth, because both you and I know for a fact that she got on the wrong train on purpose. She may have acted very foolishly, but not so foolishly that it took her nearly 90 minutes in bright daylight to notice she was going in the wrong direction. You've agreed to back her up while she goes to the capital for the weekend with her lover, Tommy Blommer. Do you know what hotel they're staying at so I can fax her copies of the divorce papers I filed today?" She groaned. "Dear God, please calm down. Nothing has happened yet." She ended the conversation without giving me the hotel information. I now called Tommy Blommer's wife and told her of her dear Tommy's intentions. She didn't believe me at first, so I sent her 2 pictures of the train station on her phone and told her to tell Tommy, if she called him, that he would probably be neutered. After that, I pressed a button and sent a pre-written text message to Anne Christine's phone. "Dear AK, although I am both a grieving and disappointed ex-husband, I must give you some good news. Our divorce papers in court mean that from now on you can feel free to have that asshole Tommy or whoever you want as long as you want. In my eyes, you're nothing but a cheap whore, and I don't give a shit about your affairs anymore. Your ex-husband." I turned off my cell phone, and a few minutes later the landline rang. I let go of the answering machine and listened to Anne Christine sob loudly. "Please call me David. I love you. Only you. And you can be sure I have never had sex with anyone else since I met you. Please believe me, I would never want to have sex with that goddamn asshole Tommy who talked me into this goddamn stupid scheme that I regret with all my heart and wish I hadn't been the stupid romantic fool I've been so far. Please give me a second chance. I'll be home in a few hours, but please call me as soon as possible. I love you." I'm sure the other passengers next to her and Tommy saw the call as an interesting distraction. Obviously, all the warm feelings between the 2 lovers had gone to a very cold level. I did not return any of her calls. Instead of talking to her, I took her clothes and other belongings to our spare room in the basement. I expected her to demand to stay in the house until our divorce was final. Anne Christine, now a complete mess, returned home by cab from the train station around 10 o'clock that evening, and to my surprise, began to object to being in the spare room. The next morning, I took the children to my parents' house, after which it was time for Anne Christine and I to have a serious conversation about our future. I told her that the divorce papers were sent to the court 10 minutes after she and Tommy boarded the train. Anne Christine talked trash to me about how sorry she was and how sorry she was for everything she had done. She said that Tommy's kind interest and gentle efforts had made her feel like a romantic teenager again. After months of rejection, she finally accepted his invitation to be his guest during a once-in-a-lifetime romantic weekend in our nation's capital. He had high-speed train tickets, a room at a well-known hotel, tickets and a table at a popular show, and he paid for everything. She expected that such a romantic weekend would spice up the sex in our marriage and make it better for a long time. Her confession: "My first regrets came after I saw a colleague on the station platform and suspected he was taking cell phone pictures of me. Then Tommy called a few minutes after the train had pulled away from the station and boasted in a loud voice to his friend that he was to spend the weekend with David Olson's pretty wife in a hotel. This boast caused giggles among the other passengers and stares in my direction. I told Tommy that he was being a pig and that I intended to skip this trip at the first stop. He begged me to forgive him and persuaded me to continue the ride as planned. Then I panicked when Marie-Louise called me and told me about your plans. I feared the worst would happen and took Tommy's foolish suggestion of a wrong train by mistake as a chance to save my marriage. I realize now that it was incredibly stupid and that it drove me even deeper into the shit." Anne Christine continued. "Then when Tommy's wife called him, even he realized that our love story could only end horribly. He demanded that I have sex with him in the train bathroom or he would tell you that we had already done it. I refused, and your divorce announcement saved me from Tommy's grip. I yelled, 'Go to hell and sleep with Tommy,' and the other passengers applauded." She left Tommy at Capitol Central Station, bought a return ticket for the next train, and took a cab from the station to her home. After a long conversation about our future, Anne Christine and I agreed to work on our marriage and not to date anyone while we worked on our marriage. I even gave in to her pleas for counseling. Tommy's wife demanded that he move out of their home and into a studio apartment on the other side of town. His driver's license had been suspended for speeding, so he biked to and from work. He usually took the shortest route, going through a small forest between 2 residential neighborhoods. One day after work, Tommy was stopped by a man in a ski mask, dragged into the bushes, brutally beaten and kicked in the balls. Since I was the prime suspect when the police started investigating what happened to Tommy, I was asked to come to the police station to answer some questions. The interrogation was conducted by a very pretty blonde policewoman. She was a few years younger than me, pretended to be a good cop, gave me a bright smile and said she understood me. She was smart, very smart because her questions were simple and sounded innocent. But I noticed a sly pattern in her questions. I was polite to her, but avoided her traps and realized they had no real evidence against me. If they had any reason to think I was guilty, she was their only chance to nail me. She did a good job, but after about half an hour, she realized it was pointless to continue any further. Making one last attempt, she turned off the recorder, shook my hand, and said, "You did the right thing with that asshole, and I'm going to advise my boss to close your case." I suspected she might have a small tape recorder in her pocket and a wrong answer might nail me. I said, "What did I do? What case? Why should I have a case?" The blonde beauty looked me straight in the eye and asked, "Do you really think I'm stupid?" I looked back and said, "No, not at all. You are smart, very smart, and I have the impression that you have done a very good job." Now she smiled and said, "But not good enough to have the suspect nailed. However, I am confident that I have solved the case and it will be recorded as technically solved but closed without being brought to trial." Anne, Christine, and I continue to go to counseling, but so far it's just a waste of time. Whenever anyone asks me about marriage, I respond as Doris Day once sang in an Alfred Hitchcock movie, "Que sera, sera, whatever will be, que sera, sera, sera."